Arc 5, Stars that Engrave History. Chapter 59, Regulus Corneas. It can't be. What the hell is this? I don't get it. Why do I have to go through this? Who do you take me for? I am the Sin Archbishop Greed Regulus Corneas. The most satisfied existence in the world. The most indisputably asserted, an existence without any wavering aspects. It's supposed to be like that, so why do I have to go through this? Don't mess around, this is no joke. Each and every one of them, what's wrong with them that they accept such nonsensical absurdities as if they are a matter of course? That man, that woman, and that night too, just because I showed a little mercy are getting too ahead of themselves. If I had been serious from the beginning then I could have had torn them apart in bits and pieces, but aren't they misunderstanding their own power? That you can shamelessly make misunderstandings, that are from my point of view, hilariously wrong, is why I hate getting involved with others. Obnoxious, annoying, irritating, infuriating, vexing, dirty, unsightly scum. I've always been doing well, for years, decades, centuries, this way for. All that time, I have been faithfully serving as a Sin Archbishop more than anyone. When I was first chosen as a Sin Archbishop and received this witch factor, I killed them all, the father who despite his poor earnings was plagued with bad drinking habits, the mother who prattled on endlessly complaining day and night, and the greedy brothers who used to ravenously eye the portion that rightfully belonged to me, were all killed by me, the villagers who looked at me like I'm an idiot too, the people of the town who pushed me and my house into that hopeless village too, the inept heads of the country who carelessly abandoned the village and the town to that state in the first place too. I tore them all apart into bits and pieces, and when everything was gone I finally noticed a way I could live. I don't need anything. Everything is just annoying. I am already satisfied. It's not like I didn't have it, I just didn't need it. Unlike the intrusive scum, I've never needed anything. Despite that, giving me something, doesn't that mean that from outside, from your point of view, that you looked at me and thought that I was a pitiful lacking existence? Everyone who wants to impose unneeded things on me should be killed, so only those who will leave the satisfied me alone should be allowed into this world. No matter who, just talking about their selfish nonsense, those shits. Who has the right to pity me? Who has the right to pity me and drive me to despair? As if I would let them. I don't need anything and neither did I ask for anything. A father who despite his poor earnings was plagued with bad drinking habits, and yet still occasionally buys gifts for me is scum better off dead. A mother who prattled on endlessly complaining day and night, while saying obvious things like apologies I've troubled you is scum better off dead. The greedy brothers who despite ravenously eyeing the portion that rightfully belonged to me used to divide my part of their bun when my food got spilled are scum better off dead. Stop you shits, being arbitrarily kind towards me. Being kind, it must mean that you think I'm low, that you're looking down on me. Someone who looks the goddamn down on others, especially someone who looks down family, it's natural that they would be hated. It's natural that they're dead. It's not my fault. I've done nothing wrong. It's your fault, you pitipatipity me, treat me like I'm pathetic, and leave me all alone. Have a taste of what it's like to be made to feel like the most worthless person in the world. Surrounding me should only be those who do not pity me. Those who do pity me should disappear from the world. I hear laughter. You're looking at me, aren't you? You looked at me and laughed, didn't you? What's so laughable about me? What did you see in me that made you laugh? All of them laughing and laughing. A bunch of powerless scum who are only good at running their mouths. Why does my heart have to break so much because of them? Don't stand in my way, don't obstruct me, don't pity me, I'm not the pitiable one, it's you helpless and ignorant, but still with greed. You have to crawl throughout your entire life just to satisfy your incomplete selves, you're the pitiable greed. I'm different, I'm not like that, I don't want anything. The desireless me is better than your incomplete selves. Don't pity me. The truth is that you're jealous of me, envious of me, you admire me, and because you can't reach me you're just running your mouth off. That's right, that must be right, it's obviously right. Wait, just wait. Just stop. Don't look at me, don't say my name, don't talk about me. Good or bad, just stop it, don't pay attention to me, ignore me and leave me alone. Even though a complete existence has a heart that should not be able to be trampled on, how come the likes of you are so insistent on interacting with me? I cannot comprehend it in the slightest. Both you and I are different people. Even thinking of getting a return by taking risks, no matter how you think about it, could never be reasonable, would always be a mistake. You're sick in the head. Calm down and think about it, and you should be able to understand. All humans except me are just floating in a fever. Asking of others, that very fact that it is understandable is meaningless, useless and irresponsible should be easy to understand. It is all a fantasy of yours which you call it love. Love is friendship and trust. What foolish idiocy. Reproductive activities themselves are the utmost disgusting acts. I don't understand what it means. For what are you doing this? Whether it's for being a mother or a child, although it makes a family, even if it is decorated with such words, it will be different from myself, whether that thing dies out or not, what does that have to do with me? If they continue to live when I die, I'll be over. If they are dead while I live would only mean my continuation. Love and affection only makes it so that people cannot be independent. A person is independent in the first place. Out of concern for those who operate under such delusions, to be looked down by others is foolish, and so I found companionship by gathering well-looking women, and in order to not be betrayed I ask for only virgins. What more do you want of me? Don't skip such a selfish act. Infringing on me to this extent, but you still ask whether you can infringe upon me even more? To think you've hit this point. To think your thoughts could be so twisted. Inflicting all this upon me, what more could you even ask of me? Just what do I have to do to not be pitted? The most pitiful person in the world, or whatever. There is no way anything said by that a lady plagued with such vulgar greed who wants to connect with one she likes is justified. Regulus, Raa. Higher, higher, along with the wind, Regulus's body flew into the night sky. The instant that his underarm had been struck, Regulus had activated Lion's Heart, and stopped his heartbeat to enter a state of invincibility. As a result, though the damage from the blow had been counteracted. Regulus, coo hook. Regulus panted, groaning as his vision blurred with pain. Regulus's stopping of time, alongside his heart, could last for 5 seconds maximum. Although during this period, he could hand Lion's Heart over to a wife without issue, going any further would mean that Regulus's body would be unable to recover. In addition, once Lion's Heart was lifted, the ever-present pain of the sudden release of a stopped heart was inescapable. Anything like pain and suffering hadn't been tasted in more than 100 years. Regulus, you're kidding. Painfully coughing hatred as if it were blood, the rising Regulus could no longer speak comprehensibly. His flying body was stuck in orbit, infused with who knows how much momentum, reaching a height that offered a bird's-eye view of the city of Pristella. Watergate City Pristella there, upon seeing the Gospel, writ that the empty wife's seat could be filled, clearly only fortune had been in his heart. Regulus, such a foolish unfolding Losing those wives which had been collected with such hard work, even his status as greed had been shaken, insulted by a damn kid whose only talent lay in his foul mouth, pitted by a shameful woman who had only just met him. There was no greater shame. He couldn't remember having ever tasted such humiliation. Wasn't it precisely because he didn't want to taste this loathsome feeling that he became an archbishop? Clearly still receiving this kind of treatment, wasn't this different from what had been foretold? Regulus, enough, hook. No need to think about being merciful. The show of indulgence would end here. This had nothing to do at all with Lion's Heart being seen through by an opponent, or with that extraordinary sword saint. As long as he could stop his heart for 5 seconds, Regulus could kill them many times over. Because he hadn't wanted to see the expressions of despair, hear cries of death, he'd refrained thus far. Using Lion's Heart's effect of creating a state of invincibility, Regulus could ignore every physical law in the world if he so wished. Reaching speeds that could outpace the wind, in that logic-defying moment, with power so overwhelming the denizens of this world could not conceive, he'd turn them into corpses. If he used the authority of greed to take him higher into the sky, it'd be easy enough to kill them by scattering sand into the city. Although the other sin archbishops had also come to the city, he couldn't care less whether they lived or died. At the moment, washing his own humiliation clean was the priority. He would have the faces of those fools who boasted of victory be painted with horror. Once this pointless momentum came to an end, his fall back to the earth would spell those guys' death. Before that, at best they could be excited about a superficial victory. Regulus, Regulus, who continuously recited words of hatred, screamed as an attack collided with his back. Looking from the side would determine that Regulus's rising momentum had come to a sudden stop, having been forcefully nailed into the air. As if something from the heavens had stepped on him to pin him in place. Reinhardt, if this were a normal duel, I'd withdraw my blade once my opponent lost their will to fight. The owner of the voice was perched on Regulus's back in midair, leisurely saying so. As to what the existence who stepped on his back in midair was, Regulus understood instantly. Shuddering as he came to this realization. He grasped just how high where he was right now. Arriving faster than the Regulus he had struck, just how had he managed to reach such heights? Reinhardt, though I have no intention of boasting, I have quite the confidence in my jumping ability. I had once even leapt from the ground, to land on the back of a flying dragon. Regulus, damned monster. Reinhardt, indeed. I am a monster who hunts monsters. For you too, the time to accept fate has come. Reinhardt's feet left his back. As soon as the sound of his voice fell, Regulus felt a fighting spirit. In the course of his life, although he had repeatedly faced strong opponents, Regulus had learned nothing whatsoever. Even the him who was like this had greeted those powerful opponents who had come forth to confront him with a yawn, and his conscious memory was limited. Relying on this memory, Regulus tried to react. Lion's Heart was activated in the same instant that an attack came. Regulus, Toward the center of Regulus's back, Reinhardt swung his hand like a blade. Regulus received an attack even more piercing than an actual blade would deal, but he took the impact with his invincibility and slammed downward in one motion. Accelerating toward the ground, Regulus slammed straight into the slate. However, the effect of the lion's heart persisted, and his body continued to dig into the earth as if being swallowed. Regulus's body penetrated the paving in a line, crossing a rigid sheet of rock to drill through the earth. While helplessly continuing to drill into the ground, Regulus suddenly noticed. If this momentum were left untouched, his body would plummet to the lowest level of the earth. He'd never considered whether or not there was a lowest level before. But the land of this world was not endless. Surrounded as it was by the Great Cascade, at the end of this would be where those falls flowed to. If he kept falling like so, was that where he would wind up? Regulus, something like this, how could I endure, go? Literally, the limitless horror had made Regulus hold his breath, reaching the limit of his heart. 5 seconds had passed. Sirens began to blare, as Regulus found himself confused over his judgment. Stopping his heart within his own body for more than 5 seconds wasn't feasible. The number of seconds that he could hold it at maximum was perhaps less than 10. And even if he could extend it, that was just more distance he dug. But here, what would happen if he dispelled his ability while drilling into the ground? There was no time to debate. Heart stopping or brain dying or whatever, stupidity should have a limit. Regulus, you. Gritting his teeth in preparation for the shock that was about to meet him, Regulus strengthened his resolve. Hearing the sound of his heart which demanded to resume its beat, Regulus lifted the effect of lion's heart, let go of his invincibility, and the laws of physics were restored. Regulus, boo-ue. His entire body, all his bones, shattered. Regulus's body was attacked mercilessly upon impact. That was a matter of course. Regulus's body had hit the ground with a much higher velocity than free falling, and the momentum continued drilled into the earth without loss. The reason his body hadn't shattered in every which way was that there was no space for it to scatter underground. However, although it could not spread horizontally, vertically was a different story. Regulus, aaue. With a hollow voice, tears of blood flowed from Regulus's ruined eyes. The impact penetrated through Regulus's body, rendering it completely destroyed. Saying he'd received damage greater than a shattered body would be no exaggeration, even the organs within his stomach had been twisted together. Originally impeccable white hair was covered with blood and mud, and his incontinent lower abdomen had lost its function and freely released waste. Existing here was a slab of meat which had lost human form. And what was most surprising was that this slab of meat still clung to life. Regulus, aao. Peerless persistence in clinging to life, or rather, this transcended persistence into a grudge. This was not merely some attachment to clinging to life. Remaining was solely a grudge against those above who remained alive. Still struggling in such a condition was this empty vanity. If I were to get serious, you fuckers, merely this. Regulus, you. Yet, this fixation should not be sullied. Having exhausted a lifetime in pursuit of being that would not be pitied, an evil whose root was unharmed after experiencing more than a century's worth of attacks and beatings, making the most suitable judgments for his own survival. Wretchedly, repeatedly using lion's heart in short bursts, Regulus dug at the earth. If he entered a state of invincibility, his injuries became insignificant. In the absence of pain, he could exercise even his injured body without harm. With his empty hands, Regulus dug ceaselessly at the soil. His body had been buried upside down, and he adjusted it by digging in a circle. Once his head faced upward, he needed only to slowly work his way above ground. And perhaps once he made it, he would see those self-satisfied maggots smugly celebrating Regulus's fall. Unforgivable. Could never be forgiven. To be mocked, to be scorned, to be pitied, was a pain without parallel. That such injuries were impermissible in life went without saying, and even in death could not be tolerated. Ah, right. Directly acting was all that was needed. Whether those who saw him, and those who didn't, if he cleanly did away with them all, no one would bully him anymore. If only he'd done so at the very beginning. This time he would certainly not make the same mistake. Returning to the surface, killing all three of them, that would be the end of this. Regulus. No longer capable of making sound, Regulus turned his hatred into strength, and continued to dig at the ground. When he made it above ground, he'd be sure to savor the sight of those guys pleading for their lives. Especially the woman who had continually scorned him, he would be sure to mock her in equal measure. The 79th wife was the role she'd been meant to fill. Speaking of which, the woman who was originally supposed to fill this vacancy was that elf woman living in that forest, where the hateful Betelgeuse had been as well. He remembered. Now, he remembered. That woman. Indeed, it was that woman. No, she had been a child then. The little brat who'd been crying and yelling nonstop when he'd gone to retrieve number 79. The little brat from then had grown into the woman of today. He now understood the reason for which he'd felt inclined to fill the vacancy with her the instant he'd laid eyes on her. A simple matter. Serving as a substitute for her mother, it would only be natural that the daughter takes up this position. That was the little brat of number 79 who scorned me, and that fool Regulus. Why hadn't I realized earlier? No, thank goodness I'd realized it now. If he'd killed them without having noticed, he wouldn't be able to derive proper joy from it. Precisely because he had now clearly realized their sins, would there be value in killing them? Would he feel the accomplishment of avenging his humiliation? Would he experience that long-lost feeling of the significance of fulfilling a desire? Watch me tarnish her, number 79. Watch me snatch her, Regulus. The one you all cherished, who dared to pity me, that girl. Regulus, ah he he. An impulse surging from deep within his throat, Regulus grew giddy with excitement. With a mouth missing teeth and cracked lips, he smiled. A hope of survival emerged. Feeling joy at the idea of brutalizing those who dared to insult him. Climbing up, and then. Regulus? The upward striving Regulus suddenly felt his fingertips come into contact with something. He withdrew the right hand with fingers no longer in comprehensible positions, and with a blinded eye tried to catch a glimpse. His bloodied and muddied form was faintly wetted by something other than blood. He tried taking a lick at it. Although tinged with the bitter taste of mud, it seemed to be water. Water. It was water. After understanding that it was water, Regulus immediately felt a thirst parch his throat. One drop was not enough. He wanted to soothe his throat, to fill his stomach. Lion's heart's effect had been interrupted, and Regulus's body, having returned to the cycle of time, finally had the opportunity to ingest again after a century. For now, water was fine. It tasted sublime. As he thought so, as if in accordance with his wishes, the water gurgled as it poured down from overhead. He sipped this slightly muddied water. Even if all his teeth had fallen out, his tongue had been shredded, his blood spurted forth without cessation, this water tasted amazing. So satisfying. That feeling existed here. The flow of water pouring in suddenly grew, and Regulus's body once again fell to the bottom. Regulus, wah? Flowing down. Flowing in. In this earth with nowhere to run, the water gradually rushed in. This was the underground without any extraneous space. In a blink of an eye, Regulus's body sank into the water where he lost his freedom of movement. Perhaps until this moment, Regulus still had not understood what was happening. This water came from overhead in Pristella, where all the canals gathered. Due to Reinhardt's attack, Regulus had smashed through the street and into the ground. Between the underground tunnel that he had made with his body, and the path he had dug himself, the four currents of the canal had been blocked. It now rushed to Regulus without pause, submerging the murderer entirely. As if expressing the fury over the destruction of the streetscape, from the city and its inhabitants. Regulus, foi. Needless to say, Regulus, who was busy drowning at the moment, naturally did not notice. Trapped by the soil, Regulus panicked from the pressure of the water that poured directly into his lungs, and began to struggle with desperation. However, he had no room with which to struggle within the earth. All he could do was curl up through the sludge himself and protect himself with Lion's Heart. When Lion's Heart was active, he would be able to breathe freely. The same held true for the pain of his ruined flesh. However, Lion's Heart could last for only 5 seconds. Once he felt his heart reaching its limit, fear of death would cause Regulus release the effect and once again be dragged back to hell. His cause of death alternated. No matter which, he could choose neither side. No matter which, neither side could not be eliminated. However, Regulus had no choice but to endure. All he could do was resent this unreasonable situation. The time limit had disappeared. Even if he could use Lion's Heart repeatedly, that wasn't the case for breathing. And to reuse Lion's Heart, he would need to wait several seconds. Heart failure. Drowning. Heart failure. Drowning. Heart failure. Drowning. As if continuing without end, pain and suffering without end or pause. Regulus opened his mouth, and water and mud poured together into open mouth. With this repeated violation of his lungs and internal organs, Regulus cried out. With a voice that could not make sound, he continued to cry out. No response. Around him, there was no one. Even so, he continued to cry out. From his cries spilled a hatred that hoped for all of mankind to die off. After he died, mocking laughter would be begged leave of. For that girl, rejoicing over the vengeance of her mother and Regulus would also be begged leave of. The mere thought of that girl's delight over Regulus's death, growing radiant with excitement, was vomit-inducing. A life's goal, a motivation to keep living, its consummation would certainly bring joy. Her existence being moved by Regulus's death, giving off radiance, to say this significance was unknown would not be incorrect. Because this was wrong, completely unexpected, unreasonable joy, the notion of satisfying that girl was unbearable. His death would greatly impact to the girl's heart. Regulus Corneas shattered through the stone street, and was buried in the dirt. Toward the grave dug by the murderer's body, water from the Watergate city gushed voluminously. How deep the murderer had sunk was unknown. However, considering the limits of his authority, crashing through to other side of the world such a thing was impossible. In all likelihood, the effect had been exhausted somewhere underground, and like that he had been crushed by the momentum. Even if he hadn't been crushed somehow, the water that poured in would never allow the murderer to escape. The murderer who indulged in his powerful authority, had finally drowned as a tribute to the city he had destroyed. Subaru. Emilia-tan, you look sorrowful. Emilia watched the cave where Regulus sunk motionlessly. Seeing a trace of mourning on her face, Subaru spoke in response. For that murderer, there should have been not a single hint of sympathy. Emilia was supposed to share that feeling, and not feeling badly about his underground demise should have been right. Subaru, although Emilia-tan's kindness is wonderful, I don't think it should be wasted on him. A completely hopeless guy really does exist. Emilia. Thank you for worrying about me. But that's not it. It's not like that. Subaru NN? Toward the concerned Subaru, Emilia slowly shook her head from side to side. Then she fell silent for a long while casting low the eyes from which hung long lashes. Emilia, Regulus, seemed. When I first saw him, I felt like I'd met him somewhere before. Subaru, so this wasn't your first meeting? In that case, when? Emilia, that, I can't remember. Faced with Subaru's question, tilted her head in doubt. Miraculously, this coincided with the exact moment the buried Regulus screamed. With a voice that could not reach, the murderer screamed for Emilia to not cheer for his death. Her mother's death and her benefactor's madness, he'd been closely entwined in both. Toward a young girl this was perhaps a turning point that she could never forget. He did not want for her to find satisfaction upon his death. Such was the murderer's dying wish, which had no way of reaching the surface. Emilia, Regulus, just where did you meet me? Regulus Corneas had left no impression on Emilia. In this ironic manner, it was precisely achieved. Chapter 60, One Ending, One Battle. The sight of a white light. Warm, soft, a light which reassured one's heart. To greet the morning with such a serene mood had been too long absent. Always waking in despair, in never-ending everydays that were as nightmares, there had never been a trace of peace. Gradually coming to firmly believe that for always and always, this darkness would never usher in the morning sun. Precisely because of this was perhaps why this ray was so refreshing. Hey, wake up. Hearing someone's voice. Beyond the white light, someone was calling for her. Guided by that voice like so, led by the hand like so, departing from this darkness. That white light glimpsed in the distance, finally engulfed her vision completely. Emilia, good morning. No matter how much of a sleepyhead you are, it's about time to wake up, you know. Opening her eyes and gazing over, a shy silver-haired maiden laughed as she spoke such words. Those words made Sylphie's cheeks become stained with tears. Cerulean light flooded the sky, as the enchantment of ice lifted. The ice that had engulfed the half-demolished church gradually turned to light, and the scattering manna was circled by the micro-spirits and disappeared. The sight of one unfathomable fantasy being overtaken by another unfathomable fantasy, engraved an agonizing wound in the hearts of the viewers. Although it wouldn't be strange to be moved to tears by such a sight, the reason why they cried and wailed, was certainly something greater than that. From what overtook their lives, a nightmare which had bound the most brilliant and sparkling time of their lives from that, they had been freed. Subaru, speaking of which, Emilia-tan is pretty amazing. Thoughtlessly loosening his lips, Subaru murmured absent-mindedly. In front of his eyes were Emilia, and the bride clinging onto her in tears, the former brides, in a healthy shape. The number of women in dresses were precisely 50, with not a single error in counting. Subaru. When I informed her that his heart and the bride's were integrating, I thought there wouldn't be a way to save the brides without having them die. Taking away the lives of the brides, rendering Lion's heart without a place to be in. Subaru had partly, seriously given up on there being another way to stop that abhorrent man. He had been prepared for victims. However, unlike Subaru, Emilia had not given up. It is true that in the fierce and life-risking skirmish against Regulus, his thinking had come to a standstill. However, Emilia did not stop thinking. With the cards she held, and considering what all would be possible for her, she had made her move. Which is why Subaru, this time, Emilia-tan completely carried us across, huh? Emilia, it's not like that. Letting out an exhausted sigh, next to the wall, Subaru remarked on his own vanquish. Hearing his relieved exhale, Emilia came back to him. Her white dress was torn, and her silver hair, which overcame the struggle for life and death, was disheveled. Even still, now after the fight had ended, Emilia looked beautiful. Inhaling with that in his mind, Subaru jerked his chin. Subaru, those people too, faces full of expressions of dissatisfaction that failed to sufficiently express their gratitude toward Emilia. Emilia, don't use me to kid around. And I am unable to explain some grand ideology to them. Even if only for a brief while, the choice of dying was forced upon them. Subaru, but there isn't anyone who died. Everyone's still alive. This point is more important than anything else. This result was more perfect than anything else. Having found the answer he was seeking, Subaru felt relieved. Emilia placed her hands on her hips and raised her voice as she spoke to the Subaru who was still regarding himself too lowly and thus putting himself down. Emilia, wounded all over, forcing yourself even so, if Subaru hadn't worked so hard, everyone wouldn't have made it so far. Lion's heart too was all thanks to Subaru noticing it. Subaru, lacking a trump card is the usual thing. That said, all along it's felt off. But thank goodness it had been noticed. Freezing the wives, to place them into a death trance. Emilia, I too, was frozen for a bit too long. Hee, Emilia stuck her tongue out with that kind of feeling. Adorable. Although for some reason, this didn't seem like content to be discussed while laughing. Which was to say, Emilia's actions and keenness to strike down Regulus had yielded the greatest effectiveness without unnecessary sacrifice. 53 lives of those precious wives had been saved. Emilia, though as for whether or not I could do it, I was a bit lacking in confidence. Subaru, but it was done even still. Emilia-tan, worked hard in order to improve your own skill and strength. Emilia, but that possibility that they would stay frozen like this also existed. To free everyone perfectly like this is what finally allows me to relax. And then as if to hide her shy smile, she touched her chest. Underneath the palm of that hand was seemingly to confirm that there remained only her pulse and heartbeat. Emilia, in addition, if Subaru hadn't removed Regulus's heart from my chest, I would have needed to use the same magic on myself. In that case, whether for Sylphie and the others or for myself, I think it'd be way worse than melting like this. Because then it could have taken another 100 years. Subaru, that again isn't that exaggeration no matter how you look at it? Emilia. Subaru, so this isn't exaggeration. Or worse, isn't this completely unparalleled extremism? Watching the silent bitterly smiling Emilia, Subaru felt a sharp shock. Due to Regulus's provocation, Emilia had wanted to stop Lion's Heart's effect on her. If an eye hadn't been kept on her, if the situation hadn't been dealt with right, then perhaps Emilia would have been parted from this life. Of course, notions of searching everywhere for a way to melt the ice in order to avoid this still existed. Subaru, something like 2 sleeping beauties, my pestilent demon truly isn't ordinary, please give me your forgiveness. Although complaining, Subaru's heart had settled down. In any case, Emilia had been rescued safe and sound, and the wives had been freed without harm. Although the battle against Regulus had yielded a scale of destruction beyond what one opponent seemed capable of, in summary, their side had sustained more or less no loss. Even so, Subaru's flesh carried all kinds of burdens, as well as an unnecessary fate shared with the witch cult. And in addition, Emilia, Reinhardt, leaving without even treating his wounds, I wonder if he'll be okay. To Subaru, who had been lost in thought, Emilia suddenly spoke thus. Subaru raised his head, gave a wave with his hand. Subaru, it'll be fine, since that guy, even if he leaves his wounds as his micro-spirits'll come along and treat them. He himself said so. Emilia, makes sense. Originally there had been quite the number of micro-spirits here, but as soon as Reinhardt left, everyone went too. Reinhardt, perhaps has the aptitude to potentially be a spirits arts user. Subaru, my niche would be completely killed, so that can't be. And as for Reinhardt's circumstances, even without anything like that, he was strong enough. Although the one who had tossed Regulus to be dealt with by Reinhardt was Subaru himself, Reinhardt's manner of battle in that final indistinguishable duel, to describe coldly in one phrase. Could a human leap with such ease above the clouds? Even if they couldn't all be classified as human, they were all knights to a candidate of the king's election. Subaru, Emilia-tan, weak though I may be, please don't cast me away. Emilia? I am especially dependent on Subaru? Subaru, is that right? That's right. From now to the future, I'll also work my hardest. Emilia, apologies, your sudden rush forward of hard work is a bit confusing. In any case, best to stop comparing this to that. To do so would be the same as Regulus, who couldn't act with the peace of mind without using others as a point of reference. Though he'd always been thought of as a man without qualities to be admired, but unexpectedly treating him as a frame of negative reference worked out just fine. Emilia. Everyone else, are they getting along fine? Subaru, it's for that reason that Reinhardt was brought along. In all honesty, because everyone else is stronger than me. To entrust to one another, or rather for one to rely on the other, the awkward expression known as faith would be the most suiting. Despite differing factions who would one day meet in conflict in the struggle for the throne, Subaru still believed in them. Even with the variance of personalities, abilities, and beliefs. At least, he'd believe that he wouldn't lose to those despicable, hopeless guys of the witch cult. Moreover, if anyone failed, if the lives of anyone who mattered was to say that Subaru needed to consider using return by death. The contract with Roswell, even if it hadn't existed, as long as there remained any slight chance of salvation, they would certainly be saved. Pain and suffering were worthy of his hatred indeed. But tragedies were surely even more worthy of his disgust. Emilia, Subaru. Subaru. Unknowing of what the Subaru who was considering death saw, Emilia bent down from beside the sitting Subaru. Her body rested against his left shoulder, as she gently stroked his lowered head. How itchy. But it was hard to part with. Subaru, Emilia-tan? Emilia, right now, I share the same sentiments as Subaru. Although I'm worried about everyone, my own strength is spent. Even reaching out a hand is impossible. So me too, allow me to pray with Subaru? In hope that everyone will be safe and sound. Subaru. Emilia, certainly there won't be any problems. Because everyone compared to us is super strong, super smart, super hard workers. In order to reassure Subaru, carefully considering her choice of words was Emilia. Her use of phrasing sounded especially of her, and Subaru too was able to relax. Faith. To have faith in everyone. And Reinhardt, who had already set off. Immediately upon defeating Regulus, Reinhardt had left to help their compatriots. A battlefield with him present would not be any cause for concern. Without losing even a single person, welcoming the coming morning. In that case, capturing Subaru's worry was only one remaining issue. Alongside Subaru, who looked toward the sky as if in prayer, Emilia, as well, looked through the ceiling of the demolished church to regard the night sky. As if to prevent Emilia from seeing, Subaru tightly grasped his chest. Alongside the moment of Regulus's death, it had felt as if something formless and black had slid into his own chest, pulsating. This must be the same thing that had happened with Betelgeuse then. So he would, in order keep Emilia from noticing, merely keep quiet. Pray to the heavens, come to an epiphany, merely keep quiet. Turn back time to just a little before Regulus had been defeated. When Subaru and the others had left for the control towers, and Otto, who had seen them off before leaving in order to recover the Book of Wisdom, even transpiring about a quarter of an hour after. That was when Otto and Felt had encountered gluttony, and had begun to fight, was when Garfield and Kurgan had just landed in the canal, was when Wilhelm had unveiled Theoresia's cloak, was when Julius had frowned upon hearing discourse of hatred that he couldn't remember, was when the church where a bride had been on her way to being forced into marriage in a farce of a wedding had been half destroyed, was when the canals to the city's north had suddenly ignited at once, was the instant when the city hall with only non-combatants left inside were attacked. Kyaha. Time for this lovely lady's debut. On the topmost floor of the city hall that stood 5 stories tall, a tremendous force shattered walls without any room for resistance. The tremendous vibration shattered the architecture's windows, and combined with the damage to the building's foundations that had happened during the day caused lethal damage. Pristella's City Hall, a building which had once been the city's center, had in the space of a mere single day turned to the verge of ruin, becoming unsightly to behold. However, whether or not the curtain would close on only the verge of ruin was dependent on what would happen here would be decided based on those results. 4 towers corresponding to 4 gates. No matter which opens, the city would indeed be flooded. To not gamble on the possibility of retaking all the towers wouldn't do. Even if you rotten meats were unwilling, you'd still need to disperse your forces, so using your total forces wouldn't do either. Long-windedly, a voice which was an assault to the ears described the immediate circumstances of the city. And then, echoing, were voices opposite to this. Everyone! Be certain to survive, to protect this city. Using our strength, let's take back this beautiful street. We who stand with justice couldn't possibly lose. Good is paid with good, and evil is paid with evil. This battle will be the victory we await. The stern voice of a young man. The brave voice of a young woman. A cry of a stern voice from a male soldier which had tangibly seen war, a cry of rational naivete from a young woman cheering everyone on. In any case, only the innocence of these unrelenting and unashamed wills and proved these unyielding lines of discourse only, the mouth which discussed this was only a single one. Why is it, this unwillingness to just think the slightest bit? Then from the same mouth which spoke these effective words, as if betraying all the preceding remarks, insulting and taunting, a voice so rooted in malice to speak as if without even conscious malicious intent of smearing them away spoke thus. And then the owner of the voice hugged her own petite frame as if seeing something disgusting, and began to shake back and forth at the shoulders. Kaya ha ha ha. Stop Stopy, please don't do this. Why does this lovely lady have no choice but to greet T's justice that exudes the same stench as soil and sweat? Yo, you rotten meats, are you all gathered together so that your brains can boil bountifully? Raising her voice high, producing a laugh piercing as a clamor. Without capability of hiding, without intent of hiding malice was this sultry voice, and the source of this voice was a young girl who had yet to blossom into maturity. Wide round eyes and delicate thin lips, blonde hair riding to shoulders and faintly reddened cheeks, as if taking the form of the concept of cuteness, that face appeared inconsistent with the young girl's luster and fierceness. Clad in pieces of cloth which were practically just lingerie, forget being a woman, for a young maiden whose human body's characteristics had yet to develop, this outfit was far too exposed. Any normal human who saw this would hold a twisting sense of aversion. The terrifying young girl, or rather, the monster's purpose lay here. Which cult sin archbishop representing lust, Capella Emirata Ludunica, a monster whose purpose was to ridicule morals and dignity of humanity as exceedingly as possible, was present. Capella, that you would delusionally believe this lovely lady would be following decorum and obediently wait in the tower is practically incomprehensible. Kind to the point of allowing you to pass these days is already charity. What is called battle is about not allowing the opponent to do as they like, and then to do precisely what they don't want you to. This kind of principle is understood even by flowers in a greenhouse, you trash meats. In the midst of these coarse words of unbearable ridicule, was the monster that was only cute in appearance, that was Capella. Using fingers to poke at cheeks while twisting her body was this monster, who resumed human form immediately upon successfully infiltrating the city hall and entered a nearby room. Meeting Capella, there was a cat-eared knight who had been immersed in her abusive words earlier. And the long-haired woman lying on the platform behind him. Here was the uppermost floor of the hall, the room that the pair of Ferris and Crush occupied. Felix, you are the sin archbishop of lust. Ferris cried out with a voice trembling with rage as he protected the bed while glaring at Capella. Capella tilted her head at the Ferris, who glared at her, then looked toward the bed behind him and nodded with an expression of acceptance. Capella, okay, your hatred is understandable. She did in fact lose to the blood. From the start it shouldn't have worked. Even though that was believed, actually seeing this failure is disappointing indeed. The most noble Ludunica blood mislead me to have just the slightest bit of expectation. Felix, for what purpose would you force something like this on Crush-sama? What has to be done to save Crush-sama? Answer me. Toward Capella, who sighed with something more like listlessness than disappointment, Ferris's cute face was dyed red in anger as he screamed. Wielded in his two hands was the soldier's short sword he'd been carrying until now. That sword was engraved with ornate decorations and the emblem of a lion, more akin to a first-class ornament of favor than a weapon of combat. Aligning with Ferris's own immature skills, it lacked the ability to make effective attacks. Capella, is that a toy? An important gift? No matter which, using your frail arms to wave something like TS is pretty dangerous, little girl, no, Capella, who had stuck out her tongue to jeer, cut her words off midway with a sudden frown. Capella, you are disgusting. You have a pretty unnatural body. Clearly a man, but that body. Something that should have been removed wasn't, so how did you become like that? From a glance it's fundamentally different from a simple change by dressing in women's clothing. Hasn't this lovely lady ruined your mood now? Felix, hook. Not only did she see through Ferris's gender, Capella showed disgust at the unnaturalness. The monster carefully examined Ferris from top to bottom, looking as if it were unintentional. Capella, that manner of dress, is it to seduce other men? In any case, all it's worth is bringing understanding of the pointlessness of humans. Men are all fools, women are all sluts, and humankind altogether is utter trash, is what this lovely lady concluded from her preferences. Felix, how noisy. Stop with the useless, answer my question already. What exactly did you do to Crush-sama? Capella, how truly annoying. Toward Capella, who hadn't yet established dialogue, Ferris was unable to bear the insult and once again let out a roar of rage. Capella, who heard this, relaxed her shoulders, and after a moment the visage of the young girl dissolved away. Felix. Before the Felix who took a stunned inhale, the young girl's body began to dissolve and reform. Short stature elongating as if in a nightmare, bright golden hair beginning to change in color. The tempting sweet face who would provoke in anyone a desire to protect it upon being seen became stern, and the lingerie-like clothing transformed into a blue dress. Although having heard of it, this process of variation and change was still the first time it had appeared before Ferris. The body which was released conformed not in the slightest to others' opinions, freely being changed as the architect of this nightmare liked. And then faced with this scene as if a nightmare, Ferris was frozen with shock. Felix, you? Capella, what's there to be so surprised about? Saying so, caressing long green hair was the face that Ferris cherished most. The figure of Capella who stood before him motionlessly, had become the very appearance of Ferris's most beloved master. This made Ferris's face turn stark white, and even the hand holding the short sword had begun to tremble slightly. Capella, look here, the ferocity from earlier has completely vanished. This face, this body, this voice, before your very eyes has become like this now. The face of Crush that he had never seen before laughed, and slowly Capella strode forward. She reached Ferris's side, stopping when she reached a distance where she could touch him if she stretched out a hand. As if thinking of something, pointed the short sword Ferris was holding to her own chest. The tip of the sword rested right at the center of Crush's large chest. Leaning just slightly forward would have it pierce through, was the position it was in. Capella, your despised enemy is right before you. Avenge me. It hurts, it hurts. Even breathing brings me anguish. Eyes unopening. Flowing through my chest isn't blood. Flowing through my entire body is something that feels like poison. So hurry, avenge me. She's saying so, like this you know. Felix, Hugh. Capella, plunge the blade in with one breath, stir the wound around as you will, and yank it out in one breath as well. Then the heart will be destroyed, the pulse will stop, the blood spurt forth constantly. You can kill her. Ferris's breaths began to grow too rapid, gaze began to wander. More prized than gold, the life of his master's enemy was being offered right before his very eyes. Just as she said, like this an attack could truly be effective. Could destroy her heart. Could kill her. However, precisely because she wore that too familiar face. Capella, stab down, stab down, stab down, stab down, stab down, stab down. Felix. Capella, stab down. Felix, you. Commanded as if by malediction, Ferris's sword short stabbed toward that chest. The blade pierced that body with ease, reaching between bones to destroy the heart within. With a twist of the keen blade, came the ruthless sound of muscle being severed, and finally along with blood that spurted forth the short sword was yanked out. Ferris, ha. Felix, trying to avoid being stained by the gushing blood, with uneven breaths backed away. The short sword slipped from his hands to the ground, the floor wetted by the dripping blood. Capella, ha. And then, Capella, who had been stabbed in the chest, knelt on the ground, spitting vast quantities of blood from her mouth. In appearance she still wore Crush's mien, a pained face stained with blood, amber eyes filled with disbelief fixing on Ferris. Capella, hurts, it hurts. Why do something like? Felix, it was you who made me stab down. Made me injure Crush-sama. Capella, so uncomfortable, so very uncomfortable. Too much unforgivable. Though clearly speaking of things like liking you, clearly loving each other. Felix. Don't say such ridiculous things. I don't share that kind of relationship with Crush-sama. Capella, is that so? In that case, the interpretation of the script itself was off. With a frank expression, Capella used a sleeve to wipe the blood from her face while standing. She casually brushed the wound on her chest, and the freshly made wound disappeared in an instant. The twisted expression of agony from before disappeared as well, leaving only a sigh. Capella, indeed, playing around is meaningless if it doesn't start from the very beginning. It's something like that. Master and vassal who love each other, forcing one to kill the lovely lady who looks just like the other. And then to unfold the tale of the shaping of a love, was what had been planned on originally, a failure indeed. Felix, putting on such a farce, just what do you intend? What do you want from us? Capella, nothing much? There isn't much intent behind it, nor is there anything to really ask of you. Watching a husband kill his wife is something to kill time. Asking an adjutant knight to wear women's clothing, something caused by a preference like that, just think of it that way. Felix, my promise with Crush-sama isn't anything superficial like that. Capella, putting proclivity and sexuality on the surface like that, this lovely lady finds that a rather frivolous performance you know. Regarding the Ferris who couldn't help but cry out, Capella tilted her head as she said so. Then Capella raised her right hand and her external form once again changed drastically. Her palm becoming like a flower's giant petal, the tentacles that stretched forth sent Ferry's body flying, before entangling him as they lifted him up, then tightened their grip as they slammed him against a wall. Felix, Hugh. Capella, Whether seeing or feeling it's the same, what a body both so slim and so fragile. If you want to become a woman so badly, how about this lovely lady lends you a hand? In this lovely lady's hands it'd only be child's play. How about being given help for removing it and forming your holes in minutes? Felix, my body is irrelevant. More importantly, that crush Sama is. Capella, how ridiculous. Something like valuing another over yourself. How about you stop audaciously saying sweet nothings? And speaking of which, you're asking about how to recover a body infected by dragon's blood to its original state? Ha, if such a method exists, it should rather be said that this lovely lady will all be more eager to know. The tentacle continued writhe forcefully, causing Ferris's delicate extremities to begin bleeding. Widening his eyes in agony, the sound of twisting broken bones echoed throughout the room. In comparison to the right hand, which had taken the form of a carnivorous flower, the raised left hand took the shape of the scythe of a mantis. Maintaining Crush's mien, she had become a repulsive monster whose left hand was an insect's and right hand was a flower's. Even so, that face bore no trace of change, all the more horrid for remaining adorned in beauty. Capella, directly turning you into mincemeat would also be pretty entertaining, and this lovely lady doesn't have much time to spare anyway. Before any unrelated others can appear, it will all do to not take care of you and your master. Felix, you cool. Capella, that said, you really are some guy foolish beyond limit. Without expecting this lovely lady to show up here, even a strategy for counterattack is sluggish. Just what point will it come to before? Having said this, Capella's once delighted face was now tinged with a touch of a frown. As if holding doubts toward what she had just said, she dragged the still gasping Ferris before her. Capella, no matter what, isn't this a bit too slow? Even given that this lovely lady infiltrated from above, it's taking too long for any others to arrive on this upper floor. Felix, Capella, you have to be planning something. Hurrying up and revealing everything is for your own good, you know. Otherwise, your most treasured master Sama will undergo an even uglier transformation. Capella's scythe extending from her left wrist reached toward Crush, who lay on the bed, and Ferris faced an incomparably cruel choice. Serving as a response to this question was Ferris's shaking voice that he squeezed out. Felix, you. Capella, which way of begging for mercy will you? Felix, you utterly useless creature. Capella, ha. Yellow pupils bearing disgust glared at Capella, a sentence uttered as if spat. Immediately afterward, the tentacles that bound Ferris began to spout smoke, and the petals discolored and rotted away. Regarding her own right arm that had been corroded away, Capella revealed an expression of surprise. Capella, rara? Just what happened to this lovely lady's hand? Felix, well, just think of it as something like a scummy personality isn't unique to your side. The tentacles rotted away, and Ferris's body was freed. Another sound overrode that of Capella, who turned her head at this. That was a cute voice with a unique cadence. Capella looked in the direction of the bed that had issued the sound at this very moment. Light flooded the entire room. A white ray which practically created the effect of instantaneously spiking temperature. This energetic beam burned away at Capella's face, destroying the entire left half of her face. Accompanying the carbonizing half of her face was the stench of scorched flesh, and Capella retreated several steps. Then, reaching out a serpentine tongue to caress the surface of that wound, smiled. Capella, standing against the face of an ally without even a trace of leniency, not could this had much of an effect. The presence of someone here is well expected, so a huge surprise to wind up like this. Something like an ally is a misunderstanding. We're commercial competitors, it's more like competitive opponents. Moreover, not like we're living such easy lives that we'd hesitate to attack upon see in the face an opponent like that. Capella, a conditional ally will sooner or later become an enemy. In that case, was especially aiming at the face some deliberate preemptive scheme? If truly so, your personality might be a little too twisted too. Avi already said, there wasn't any such confusion of private and public affairs. I mean, if the head was purely to see destroyin' it would prove fatal, hopin' so for a moment all. Saying so, the person who clambering from the bed gave the sigh of betrayed expectations. In place of Crush, lying on the bed had been Anastasia. She touched her own wavy hair colored with green dye, responding with a slight smile to Capella, who had survived with even half her face burned off. Anastasia, though what clearly hoped for it, seems no death happened. Capella, even though you might be different from the type of woman who only smiles upon seeing Monet. But something like unhesitatingly scorching half the face of a woman, a personality surpassing a reasonable amount of self-interest, truly a female meat that this lovely lady would take an interest in. Anastasia, being taken interest in by a person like you, even us here would feel a bit of resistance. Why see us here's something beloved is with long fur that feels silky to the touch. With formality, Anastasia responded frankly to the monster Capella's words. With a small cough she approached Ferris, who was near the bed, taking his wrist and helping him up. Watching the teary-eyed Ferris, Anastasia with "Isn't this enough as a precursor?" Anastasia, no information's been gathered at all. At the very least, let's set Crush as a fair aside for now. Felix. I understand. You've accompanied me far already in such a risky gamble. Anastasia, for this situation, us here's holds a rather large share of the responsibility, so let's just call it that. Even the ability of Ferris, who was the leading healer in the kingdom, could do nothing to heal the current Crush. To save her, there was no other way aside from finding the reasoning and a solution from the one who had done this to her. As for what Ferris had prosed, Anastasia could not refuse. Welcoming each candidate to the city of Pristella had been Anastasia. And then things had hit this point. Due to holding a share of responsibility for the matter, Anastasia was unable to refute Ferris's plea. Anastasia, it's something like this, call this completely fruitless, and yet it still managed to betray expectations. Capella, to be burdened by expectation like so, my deepest apologies, but these feelings are truly, completely absent. But there shouldn't have been any guarantee that I'd show up at all? Anastasia, wasn't there an announcement from Natsuki-kun? Seems that, you would have acted upon hearing it. Sending the main combative force away, leaving the base camp undefended would surely prompt activity from the enemy. In the first place, the witch cult had no obligation to greet them with integrity. Truly, this was just as Capella's earlier speech had said. Anastasia, Natsuki-kun there, grew naive at a critical moment. Although in no way was there a possibility of a guarantee, strictly speaking, to consider from the nature of the witch cult, showing up to attack could only be one of either wrath or lust. So Anastasia had laid a trap, and allowed the city hall to be attacked. The real Crush had, of course, fled to a nearby shelter with the other injured. There would of course be no one who would step into this uppermost floor. People still remaining in this building, aside from those on this topmost floor. Capella. HMPH. People whose minds move a little too quickly, are just the slightest bit irritating to others. But then, aren't you underestimating this lovely lady? That cat ears over there, this little lady over here, any eye that looks like someone who can hold their own in battle. Anastasia, being called a little lady is really rather embarrassing. Though we here look like this, seems that I'm technically still a grown adult. At Capella's remarks, Anastasia closed one eye in response. Capella, it's been decided. That cute face of yours, lovely face, is all that'll be when everything below your neck becomes a locust. After turning into that, do try again, to be able against me using that rude mouth of yours. Anastasia, how rather horrid, in that case, best to bid farewell for now. Capella. Anastasia's refusal surprised Capella, who had been the threatening party. Anastasia tugged on her still green hair, glanced about the room. Anastasia, we here should have mentioned already, we've been awaiting you all along. In that case, we couldn't have been waiting without making any preparations. As soon as the sound of her voice fell, Anastasia rapped gently against the floor with her fingers. Two ringing sounds, as if some kind of signal. Immediately afterward, cracks appeared in the floor by Capella's feet, and the broken body of the young girl plummeted downward. Capella, oh my. The bottom of the floor falling away, and appearing in the floor she had plummeted to was a similar opening. In this manner Capella continued to fall floor by floor, falling the height of 4 stories in one breath, landing directly into an underground chamber beneath the first floor. Splat, with such a sound, Capella's body exploded. Defenselessly slamming into the ground, the body of the young girl was completely flattened on the cold surface. Blood gushed forth from her face, and her limbs were folded over and broken with a miserable appearance. But the body that became a piece of flesh immediately began sluggishly move in hands and feet, and young girl's body stood in the form of an aqueous amorphous state. Appearing there was the figure of a seductive woman. Clad in extremely revealing clothing, displaying her ample flesh without a trace of shame, the rare sight of black hair was done into a 3-stranded braid. Exuding a somewhat dangerous aura, and a beauty that caused restlessness in its wake. Whether Ferris or Anastasia, both should have no idea who this appearance belonged to. In any case, the two that remained on the 4th floor shouldn't be able to see her transformation. And so, there should have been no one who would react with surprise upon seeing this figure. Capella, really, isn't this just going to make me so very delighted, so very excited? Kaya ha ha ha. With the manner of an agonized death and a manner that couldn't feel agony, Capella let go her voice. That was a light and delicate sound incongruent with her mutated appearance, echoing throughout the entire underground chamber of the city hall. In shadows, in air both cold and humid. This was not merely the landscape of a basement, it was part of the numerous waterways distributed throughout the city, part of the management facilities used to maintain these waterways. From somewhere came the sound of rushing water, and from somewhere else overhead a breeze blew by. Capella, receiving such a warm welcome and whatnot, allowing me to freely change the size of my chest is exciting, I assented. To return and embrace them tight, to have them rectify their upbringing from within this lovely lady's arms, to have them never love anything aside from this lovely lady. Can't return. Capella. Cheeks dyed crimson, Capella, who was exhilarated to the point of trembling, was barred by someone unknown. Sounding out was a deep voice, a man's voice muffled and sulking. As she heard this voice, Capella raised her head, and from the shadows underground emerged a person's figure. The expression of Capella, who saw him, suddenly twisted. The absent-minded expression that had been her face until now, immediately contorted to one of loathing, as she glared at her opponent. Capella, by this lovely lady's aesthetic values, the most intolerable are the ones who try to hide their ugliness, aren't they? I see. Rest easy. By my aesthetic values, your feelings can't be tolerated either. Responding to Capella with an apathetic manner, heaving a sigh as if something were weighing him down. And then? Shouldn't you have heard from above? Your actions have been seen through by that wicked one on our side. Which is to say, in terms of wickedness, how could you hope to triumph against our princess? As he spoke, the heaviness that sat in his voice was still present. The sword attached behind his side was drawn from its sheath, and sluggish light reflected onto it from the empty space above his head. Standing there was a man with one arm. Was a shadow clad in a black helmet. Was a singularly dressed strange man. The stranger, facing Capella, pointed over with the single arm holding the blue dragon sword. Al, though I've only just greeted you, I'm in a terrible mood today. Before I die, hurry up and leave the hell away from here. Mollusk.